Welcome to Bird Burger. For a while, Micro Four Thirds format was on the rise, but it seems in past years that it's fallen a little bit off the radar again, only to start making a comeback recently. Is the Micro Four Thirds format still a worthwhile investment, and have they made any new notable products? If so, how do they measure up to the latest and greatest full-frame cameras? Today, I'm joined by Espen Helland, who is quite possibly the most popular wildlife photography content creator using OM Systems Micro Four Thirds format on YouTube. Espen, we had you on last week. Super excited to have you back again today. How are you doing?
It's really good to be back. Thank you very much for having me. I'm good. Yeah. How are you?
Doing great. Today we're really going to be hammering on. Last time we got to hear a little bit about your journey as a content creator and a little bit about why you use Micro Four Thirds, all of that stuff. But for those who don't know, maybe that are watching this video, don't know what Micro Four Thirds means, and maybe are completely lost, in a nutshell, Micro Four Thirds refers to the type of sensor in the camera that takes in light and color and reads the image. Micro Four Thirds is a 4x3 formatted sensor that winds up being roughly half the size of the kind of full frame sensor that a lot of wildlife photographers wind up using. This therefore kind of affects image quality, physical features about the camera, etc. Rather than explain some of the pros and cons of them myself, I'll let the master do that though, who has all the experience with it. Can you tell us a little bit in general about how having Micro Four Thirds on as your sensor affects the camera's capabilities for kind of maybe for the better?
Well, first off, I'm definitely no master, and listening to you, I think you sound a lot more knowledgeable than me on the topic. I'm not very technical minded whatsoever. I mean, for me, it was really that I guess having that the micro sensor means that you get that twice. You don't get a twice focal length, but it's cropped, so you get the equivalent.
Yep.
Twice the focal length. You feel like you're getting closer. So with my 300mm lens, I can get equivalent kind of 600mm, which is a big deal when you're a wildlife photographer. You want to photograph a small bird. That is so helpful. And then just the lightweightness of it. They can afford to have the lenses and the gear quite a bit lighter, and that really suits me as a vlogger as well, as we talked about last week. That it's just also much easier to take with me. I can go out with a small backpack. I can get on my bike, go up the hill or something like that, and I got everything I need with me. So it just suits me really well. Yeah,
you had actually the day before we're filming this podcast, but this has probably been 2 weeks by the time this podcast comes out. You just did kind of a review of the new OM5, I believe it was, and just how light that thing is. I forget, you said it's like under a I forget, what was the weight that you mentioned?
I have no idea. Do you use ounces and stuff? I don't even know what that is, but it's under 400 grams.
Yeah, which is incredibly light. I'm trying to think of how much that is in pounds. I can't do that conversion, but I know roughly.
I think is 2.2 pounds is a kilo, so like half and a bit, so like
probably about a pound.
0.8 of a pound.
Yeah,
can you say that? I don't know if that's such a thing.
No, that's crazy how incredibly light that is. Weight is a huge factor, especially when you're doing things like you mentioned in that video where you're hiking around, stuff like that. Probably the biggest upside to Micro Four Thirds, at least in my mind, is the price though. Do you mind me asking how expensive your camera body wildlife setup is? No, not at all.
I think, well, when I first started out, that was one of the things that kind of attracted me to the system as well, that, this could be kind of affordable. So I traded in my Canon gear, which I was using then, and I went for, a bit of a cheaper camera and stuff. So that was probably about £400 or £500, and I invested more in the lens, the 300 f4, which was then £1,500. I think I got it for used.
Yeah.
But since then, I've traded up a little bit. So now I got the OM1, which I think is valued at £2,000, and my lens, which is, so I think the gear in itself is probably £3,500.
Mm-hmm.
So, and obviously it adds up, like, definitely, but probably not comparable to some other systems and some of the lenses at least.
Yeah, I mean, you already are aware, but I think you were mentioning in the last episode, like, how you were thinking about getting a 500 f4 prime when you were in the APS-C format still. Yeah, that thing is more that thing is pricey. Like it's probably was more than the cost of your setup right there. So yeah, the price is just awesome in terms of Micro Four Thirds and how much money that can save you and stuff like that. So that's huge. And I always laugh when because I have a couple of videos, right, that are like what you can buy on a $1,000 budget in wildlife photography, what you can buy on a $2,000 budget, $5,000 budget, something like that. And I always laugh when I get those comments occasionally that are people like, oh, like you're so privileged, like I could never afford this. I'm like this, I know this is an expensive genre, but $1,000 is actually really cheap for wildlife photography, you know. So it's kind of funny, but anyways, so yeah, I think that's a huge pro for sure. The weight and the price are definitely the two things that are always talked about with Micro Four Thirds. We also sometimes hear about those downsides that people often say about why they maybe don't use Micro Four Thirds. So some say, for example, that the noise quality is too high for their liking, or the resolution just can't be high enough for maybe certain scenarios, is what some people's opinions may be. What's some of maybe your opinions on those popular statements, and how have you maybe dealt with some of those things in your wildlife photography journey and overcome them?
I think when it comes to ISO capabilities and that, obviously it's nice to have the best you can have, and it would be nice if you could go out and shoot at night. But I think as well, like it's important to know that it is photography. We are shooting with light, and you're probably not going to create like an award-winning image when you're pushing those high ISO and it's dark and we don't really have the light anyways. But saying that though, like one of my ways is to really take advantage of the image stabilization of the system. You're just firing that really low to then push my shutter speed down, so I can then get my ISO down as well if I want to photograph in that when it is quite dark. Yeah. And I think when it comes to pixels in that, I mean, I'm sure like there'll be some cases where some people need that, like I don't know what they always need it for, but I think for a lot of people, maybe it depends how you use the images, I suppose. Yeah. But I think as well that you can definitely get a lot out of the 20 megapixel cameras as well. I have one of my favorite images hanging in my parents' wall. It's like 1 meter by 70 centimeters, something like that. Yeah. Taken on my EM1 Mark II, so it's not, and I could easily print that bigger as well. And using things like gigapixels AI these days, you can crank it up even more and create some big posters out of it. So I guess one of the ways I get around that is I try not to crop too much. I rely more on that reach that the system can give me, and I don't crop away too much of my pixels. But usually these days, most of my images go on social media or something, and I don't actually need
a huge print
amount of pixels.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, I mean, so I used to shoot on Micro Four Thirds, and I switched up over very shortly after starting my YouTube channel, ironically, because I got like a super good deal on a full frame camera at the time, and I was just like, this is where I'm going to go. And I knew eventually I just personally wanted to do that anyways. But something I've realized since that switch is that those crazy high resolution amounts haven't really made too much of a difference to me in my wildlife photography, and especially after you take into account, like you said, some of those like Topaz Gigapixel or the newest Photo AI, like those things are so good to where like those resolution problems are just like virtually almost gone. So I definitely have experienced that even as a full frame user. Like I never use, my camera has 48 megapixels. I never feel like I have to, like it's very, very, very rare that I feel like I'm like, oh, I am glad that I had 48 megapixels there, because I wouldn't have got the shot otherwise, The noise is definitely something I do appreciate more about the full frame that I get to shoot with now. But again, I think that comes down a lot to your scenario, your use case, stuff like that. For example, if you're shooting out in open fields, there's a much less likely chance that you're going to be needing that type of really, really low light capability, as opposed to if you're shooting like in a dark jungle all the time, or I don't know, things like that. So there's a lot to consider for sure. Yeah,
definitely. I did notice a lot of improvements in the OM1 came out, and that came out before I was doing black grouse workshops. The black grouse have a wreck just up the hill from here, and you start really early. You start while it's so dark, you can't shoot. So you got to wait for the light to come in.
Yeah.
But I was really, pushing the ISO there, and it is nice. That camera you can push it a little bit more. It is nice for those birds that fly in those hours of twilight, and that you can actually crank up the shutter speed a bit to capture them.
Yeah. So the real question is, someday when I'm able to make it over to where you are you going to take me to that black grouse lek?
Absolutely. Yeah. Come on over.
That's something I want to do for so long, but yeah, so one day I'll get my way over there.
Oh, definitely.
So, yeah. I love that. You even kind of mentioned it. We've been talking about it a little bit, but you shoot specifically with OM Systems, which used to be called Olympus and has rebranded in the last couple of years. I forget exactly when, but yeah, I mean, being honest, I've been pretty impressed with how much they have stepped up their game, as opposed to someone like me that still shoots on Panasonic, and I have not been impressed with them stepping up their game too much in the recent years. Like, they started off so strong, and when I was getting into them, they were still like a growing powerhouse, and then as soon as I got into them, they kind of just like flatlined, and I'll be like, I've seen too much. But yeah, on the contrary, OM Systems has been really awesome. Yeah, like they released, I'm trying to remember exactly when that was, maybe a year or two ago. They released that the 500 millimeter lens, which is like a 1000 millimeter full frame equivalent. That was a huge stride, and they have some great prime lenses. But mostly also, I think their autofocus system has, shown that it's worthy of competition with, Canon and Sony and all those other big names. What is it that you like about OM Systems, and why is it that you've chosen to stick with them? Even if maybe you've had opportunities to change your camera system or stuff like that.
I think I definitely remember when I first switched to then Olympus, and it wasn't long after that I just switched, and then they announced, oh, they couldn't take it over, and I was definitely a little bit nervous at that point, just like, oh, did I make a big mistake here? What's going to happen? And I was thinking like, oh, I'll go down with the ship, like I'm going,
I'm committed.
It's good. I have hope. Yeah, I'm committed. I have faith that these guys are going to take care of it, and I guess that like they really did. They stepped up their game, like you said. And one of the things that I love that they just like, well, we're going to be focusing more on nature and outdoors. And I was like, this is I'm home. Like this is what I like to shoot. And I think what I'm seeing recently as well, and I'm lucky enough to be a part of now as an OM ambassador, is the community that goes on there. They're really good at creating a lot of content on YouTube. They do so many live videos. They're like almost every week there's several videos from actually different countries as well, in different languages, where they talk to people in the field and give advice and tips on the system. And so it's just a really nice community to be a part of. Yeah, and I think now with the new OM1 and its capabilities, and like you say, the autofocus is just it's just blowing me away on it anyway. So I can take images now that I wasn't getting before, so it's really given me that confidence in the system that I'm happy, I'm staying.
Yeah. And you mentioned something. You mentioned there is you mentioned the community and kind of the culture that they've built up in OM Systems. I think that's really cool, because I think that's something that maybe a lot of times is just totally overlooked when you're considering a camera brand. But in reality can be very important. Like I know, for example, like Josh Brown, Body Josh, we would talk all the time about when he was on Nikon, he was just so dissatisfied with Nikon services and like the community they had built up and all of that stuff, right? And so, yeah, I think that's a hugely important thing that sometimes is just totally overlooked, but is really important, is how is this camera company kind of like geared towards the user? Are they really trying to like provide what's best at a decent price, or are they kind of just ignoring all the feedback they're getting and all that stuff? So that's really cool that you mentioned that. So I know that you're a user of Topaz AI programs. I feel like because we have such advanced and sophisticated software, we can worry less also about the in-camera quality of images. So that's kind of what we were talking about before, right? With resolution and using gigapixel or even photo AI. It's pretty incredible nowadays what you are able to do in post-processing. How big do you think that the gap between Micro Four Thirds and maybe full frame image quality is now, due to the knowledge that you have that you can fix so much with these kind of advanced editing programs and in post?
Yeah, I remember starting to use Topaz, and it was just, what is this magical thing? Just like seeing the noise just disappear, absolutely incredible. I mean, to be fair, from what I see, using the equipment that I use and using the products, you know, it looks great. Like, it looks really good. But I mean, I have never had a full frame, so I wouldn't be able to compare the two. But maybe I should turn it back on you. You were just saying that you switched from one to the other, you know. So how do you find that experience of trying Topaz and both?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I had gone back when I first switched over to full frame. Actually, that's not true. When I first started getting into Topaz, I did go back and I looked through a couple of old MFT images and tried using Topaz on a lot of those. And it definitely makes it pretty close. Like, I feel like like, if we're talking about how big we're going to blow up photos again, like if you're trying to blow them up really big, I can see where those differences are really going to come into play. With a lot of like the advanced denoising that they have and stuff like that now, it really makes it to where it feels like you can get pretty similar-ish results as long as your noise wasn't out of control, right, in the moment. So there's still like a little bit different of like that cap maybe between it. Like, let's say, for example, sunrise, you know, you're waiting on the sunrise in the morning, and with a full frame, maybe you can shoot at like 6:05 a.m. versus like a MFT, you might have to wait till 6:15 a.m., right? So you might have to wait like just a little bit longer if you're, you know, need just a little bit more light. But as long as you get it in the right ballpark, I feel like you wind up getting those very similar results like we talked about. So yeah, I think that it's pretty cool what you're able to do with Topaz. So what would be the path that you would recommend to other wildlife photographers just starting out in terms of camera gear, and what would you kind of maybe recommend that they buy and upgrade to over time? I'm
quite happy with the way I did it, in that I kind of invested it in a camera body that was a bit older. I didn't mind so much, and I put most of my money into getting the best lens that I could afford. And I think that is a good way to go, because you know, the lenses just last so much longer, and they have so much to say with what, you know, the quality you get out of images. So I would definitely invest more in lenses, and then you upgrade the camera body when you can. When you start noticing what your camera can't do, like you've pushed it as far as you can, and you're just like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, you know, then you know, do your best to get an upgrade on that, I think. That's
great. I love that piece of advice. I think you're totally on spot with in terms of lenses. I agree, are definitely like the more stable thing that you can count on over the years. So kind of like investing lower in your camera body, and as you hit those limits, kind of upgrading those, I think is some fantastic advice, and I'd agree with that. So an MFT genre, great place to start in terms of pricing, like we've already talked about so much. So if you're kind of unsure, you know, if you're still wanting to get into the field, it's great to start out that way. So I love that. And yeah, it's been really good getting to have you on. Thanks for chatting about Micro Four Thirds and kind of your take on it, as well as just sharing a little bit about your journey and all that. So I've really enjoyed getting to have you on the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. It's been great to be on. Thanks.
Thanks you guys so much for watching. Make sure to go subscribe to Espen Helland's channel in the description below. If you want to learn a little bit more about Topaz programs, make sure to check out this video here in the end screen to learn a little bit about Topaz Photo AI, which is the best Topaz program available out there that can dramatically change your post-processing images and can save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in gear investments.